All right, my English teacher friends. So I present to you another writing workshop video by which I use Oscar-nominated shorts to solidify for students how to write introductory paragraphs for FRQ1 and FRQ2 on the AP Literature and Composition exam. But there's a caveat in saying that this is not just for AP Literature and Composition teachers. So any on-level ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th grade teacher that is teaching students how to write introductory paragraphs for the purposes of literary analysis, this is perfect for you. So my template is universal, works at all those grade levels, and is a perfect fit for them. And I do these exercises with my on-level ninth graders just as well as my AP Lit and Composition. I just choose different gradations of, uh, you know, trickiness with regards to the film. This one is super tricky. It's called Interior Disaster, and it's one that I did end up having a Socratic seminar about because it's like our octopus friend from the 2022 exam. It's twisted, and it lends itself to a variety of misreads and complex reads. So I needed to debrief it with my students a little bit. It's perfect for AP literature, probably not something suited for like ninth and 10th graders. It might be a little too tricker rated for that grade level, but you can see how the template works nonetheless. So without further ado, I'll jump right into Interior Disaster and demonstrate for you how my students would write introductory paragraphs while pulling the strings of my declarative and inverted thesis to house the thesis point, but to do so with pizzazz and flair to ensure that they're going to get the sophistication point out of the gate as well. So, as always, I tell my teachers this: you got to Bob Ross your instruction. In order to get my students to write like what you're going to see, I've Bob Ross the heck out of my instruction, and here's what I mean by that. There's a huge fundamental difference between the assigning of writing and the explicit direct teaching of it. So when I Bob Ross my instruction, I'll say things like this to the kids. All right, class, there's two ways to write an introductory paragraph. You can declare the thesis, and before class, I wrote 3 declarative theses for you. Here they are, 1, 2, 3. I talked my way through it. And then there's another way you could approach it, and that's the inverted thesis. Before class, I wrote you 3 inverted theses. 1, 2, 3, talk my way through it. All right, guys, you've seen it 6 times. I've demystified the process for you. On your mark, get set, go, do. And it really demystifies the process for students when teachers position themselves as the expert writer in the classroom, and you paint with your students. Be like Bob Ross. Get to that canvas, get to that easel, and paint with your students until they can do it independently. So at the time of recording this video, it's Thanksgiving break, and I am Bob Rossing far less for my students than I was in the beginning of September when I first got my students. This is the 6th or 7th Oscar-nominated short that we've done as a class, so I really don't need to model it anymore for them. You're going to see my students' pure writing, unassisted by me. I did not help them do this at all. The only thing we did was we did my Plato's Plato discussion, which is kind of this quasi Harkness discussion, Socratic seminar, fishbowl, gamified thing that we do. And I have some things in my YouTube channel on that Plato's Plato discussion, but I'm not going to delve into it right now. It's not the place. So, how do you construct the introductory paragraph? Those that are familiar with my work, you know this. We're doing literary analysis, so we're not going to declare the thesis. My students declare their thesis when they write rhetorical analysis, and then for the other expository modes of argument, synthesis, persuasion, and research, it's a 50-50 coin flip. You can declare or invert. So for rhetorical analysis, you always declare. And for literary analysis, you always invert, and I'll explain why in just a second. Implicit in the prompts for FRQ1 and FRQ2 for the AP Literature exam, and then implicit in the prompt FRQ2 on the AP Language exam are two questions. What is the authorial intent, and how does the author construct meaning? If students answer both of these questions successfully, if they've ascertained the meaning of the work as a whole, then they will get their thesis point. They have to get these two questions nailed. So here's what I have my students do. I'm going to skip right to the inverted. The first three sentences of their inverted thesis are going to answer the question, what is the authorial intent? And the last sentence is going to answer the question, how does the author construct meaning? When you answer the question, how does the author construct meaning, you're getting your thesis. You're stating the thesis. So when you're talking in terms of devices, terms, techniques, that's going to be the thesis. I find that when students start there and then they go into what is the authorial intent, they've switched the expository mode from literary analysis to plot analysis. We want to ensure that students are writing literary analysis from start to finish. So I like this: 3 sentences, authorial intent; 1 sentence, how does the author construct meaning? So let's go back and look at all the pieces. 3, authorial intent; 1, construction of meaning. So in terms of all the ingredients that go into the inverted thesis, the next thing we got to talk about is the Word Study Academy that I run and the Nuance Academy, which are staples of my instruction, 9, 10, 11, and 12th grade, on-level and AP courses. So due to the vocabulary void that I've inherited over the years, and it's just becoming worse and worse and worse, I do intensive word study with my students to address that gap, because it seems like each year they come to me with smaller words, fewer words, like very, very small lexicons. So in order to really augment their vocabulary, I do intensive word study academy. And I teach them a lot of tier 2 level words. By tier 2, I simply mean your average run-of-the-mill SAT level caliber words. So in the exemplars and models that I'm going to show you that my students wrote, note their vocabs in November already, and compare them to your students. I mean, we read a lot, but I gamify the instruction for word study. Do a lot with that. The sentence constructs are also going to be interesting. I equip my students with Strunk & White's seminal text called Write It Right. And rule number 18 in that text states that there's 12 different ways to cobble together a single sentence. My students know all their parts of speech, and they know the names of all 12 of those sentence constructs and their purposes. We've skilled and drilled it since I got my kids the day after Labor Day. So since day one, we've been skilling and drilling this. So now after Thanksgiving, let's see how they manipulate their syntax and wield these 12 sentence constructs in the hopes of getting the voice, the rhythm, the flow, and that elusive sophistication point. And as I've already hinted at, it's always going to be 4 sentences. So let's go back again. 3 sentences, authorial intent; 1 sentence, construction of meaning, fits perfectly in this inverted paradigm, right? So let's take a look at what my students are doing. If one is to closely examine the interior design of another being's life, it would be clear that most people are fighting a ton of personal demons. And that's the exigence, that's the aha, the universal truth, the main theme of the author in this, of the director. So you state that first. You want 3 sentences of this. Now let's just flesh that out. Strange as it is, oftentimes those who have the messiest interior lives are the ones trying to orchestrate the interior designs of other people's lives. But here's the thing: one cannot take care of others until they have their own house in order. Noah Adamson conveys this through the juxtaposition of one's personal struggle to the concept of commanding interior design. So that's 3 plus 1. So note the use of the terms, devices, techniques in the last sentence. Juxtaposition and, the one's personal struggle. So you get into conflict a little bit, right? So you just drop the 2 sometimes three most salient terms, devices, techniques in that last sentence. I really tell my students, don't make it a literary terms dumping ground. So you can do this every single time for FRQ1 and FRQ2 on the AP Lit exam, or anytime you're writing literary analysis. Let's look at student number 2. They're going to follow the exact same template, 3+1. A person's inner life is just like a home, deeply private and intimate. If outsiders were to take a glance at the proverbial furniture of another's mind, they'd most likely see a lot of chaos, turmoil, and struggle. To live is to suffer in many regards, and often that struggle is deeply personal and private. So we're 3 sentences in. Hit me with the terms, devices, techniques. Noah Adamson conveys this through the metaphor of housekeeping. So all you need is one. Like, it's a whole extended metaphor. Like, if they're talking about the metaphor, they're going to talk about the other things if they were to proceed through the rest of this paragraph. So let's go back to the first one. Note the vocab in here, right? Not over the top, the kid's in his wheelhouse, but good words like orchestrate the interior design of other people's lives, right? So I didn't talk about this earlier in my previous video I did. In Tier 2, we also talk about the importance of keeping things colloquial and vernacular as well as academic. That wants to be teeter-totter balanced. If you're too tier 2, you're going to sound overly contrived and pedantic. And if you're too colloquial vernacular, you're going to be too small and miss out on that sophistication point. So it's really good to teeter-totter balance that all together. And this student does a great job of that. And I think any College Board reader, any AP reader would get to that period right there at the end and say, hey, table, take a look at this one. This kid's going to get the sophistication point if they can carry on the rest of the way in their essay. This is exceptional, and it's just 3+1. The vocab's up without being overdone, and the sentence constructs are super supple and nice and flowing. I don't want students to have a lot of parallelism in their introduction or throughout their essay at all, unless they have a purpose and an intent. And for those that are familiar with the template I use for my body paragraphs, the syllogistic method, in the conclusion of the syllogism, you might want to have some parallelism when you're hammering home the promise of the first premise. But apart from that, you really don't want parallelism at all in your writing, because it creates that da-da, 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 da-da kind of rhythm and flow. And that's not going to bode well when you're racing against a rubric as stringent as AP Literature and Compositions. So this one is not as flashy as the first, but it's still the 3+1. Vocab is good. I like this proverbial furniture. It's good use. And, it's not as flashy as the first, but it gets the job done. And they're definitely getting the thesis point no matter what. It's very clearly articulated. This student just doesn't have the chops of student number 1. So let's see what student number 3 does. Again, they're going to do 3+1. 3 authorial intent, 1 construction of meaning. The internal home life of most individuals tends to be a pretty messy affair. Chasing personal demons and waging personal wars, these private moments speak of one thing. Most of us have a lot of housekeeping to do. In fact, it's not until we have arranged all of our metaphorical furnishings that we can be of any help to others. Noah Adamson hyperbolically depicts this concept through an extended metaphor that juxtaposes life to keeping one's figurative house in order. And that's perfectly done, right? So you got the terms, devices, techniques down here in that last sentence. Universal truth, universal theme up top in the first 3 sentences. Always 3+1. Focus on that tier 2 without overdoing it. Those 12 sentence constructs always come in play for voice, rhythm, flow. Keep it supple, keep it fluid, keep it flowing. And that's how my guys do their introductions for literary analysis, but in particular FRQ1 and FRQ2 for the AP Literature exam. So that's what November looks like for my students. It's only going to get better, and I'm expecting my scores are going to be very good this year because my students are getting very disciplined. and are putting in a lot of effort. And that's one of the cool things about using these Oscar nominated shorts. Sometimes kids will walk in and they're like, "Hey, can we practice? You got any cool movies to see?" And, when kids are asking and begging to learn, well, it doesn't get any better than that. So if you would like access to these slides, feel free to give me or drop me an email at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com and I can pass them on to you. Also note that going forward, that I'm teaming up with the National Writing Project. So all the PDs that I offer are going to be hosted by the National Writing Project. So once a month, we're going to have this cadence where I'll be doing 2-hour intensives. So as an example, I did one in November on my alternative grading methods. December is going to be teaching line of reasoning. I have AP strategies for success, Nuance Academy, Word Study Academy, teaching voice rhythm and flow. So every month we're going to be doing something, and they're very inexpensive, but NWP also gives you professional completion hour badges for those that need PD hours. They're accredited, well-known institutions, so you can't go wrong. They're also housing my Teach It Right 5-week mastermind. Our next one's going to begin in January, and they also have my self-paced course. So if you want more on that, you can go to www.teachinghowtowrite.com. Be well for now. Happy teaching, happy writing.